This is a short video about David Eagleman's The Brain. It was a fascinating read. Took me only around a week to get through it, and one of the main reasons for that was it was incredibly engaging. Wanted to find out more all of the time. The pace is excellent, doesn't linger on or get too bogged down on a particular aspect, a particular part of the brain. Keeps things moving really well, and at the same time offers some considerable depth. The book isn't highly technical. Should be possible for most people to understand most things that he talks about in the book, but he gives a kind of tour of the human brain, starting with an overview and then looking at particular features, learning about the synapse, the neurotransmitters, how signals are transported across the brain. It's incredibly useful because it can help you to become more aware of your own emotions, why you feel a particular way, and how your mood is going to change throughout the day. One thing that's quite interesting, for example, is that in terms of just the eyes, we have something called an internal model, and one fascinating thing I learned from the book is that we have data input, we have vision coming into our eyes, and this information goes to the back of the brain. The vision cortex is at the back, but as the light goes into your brain, first of all, most of it goes through the thalamus. The thalamus is in the middle of the brain, so from eyes to thalamus to visual cortex. But one really interesting thing is that there's also information going from the vision cortex at the back of the brain to the thalamus. So actually it's a 10-to-1 ratio. There's 10 times more information going from the vision cortex at the back of the brain to the thalamus than there is coming in through the eyes. The reason why this is interesting is because, we can think that we see what comes into our eyes. And actually it's not as simple as that, because we already have models, we have a lot of content, we have expectations, we have a map of the environment already in our brains. And really what the eyes are doing, and it's quite easy to understand how this evolved over millions of years, is that your eyes are really scanning for differences between what's in the environment and what you expect to be in the environment. One interesting thing about humans is that we are born into the world with a brain that is not fully formed. It's very incomplete, it's unfinished. Unlike zebras, for example, who within 45 minutes of being born can run around, and giraffes, for example, they're able to walk very quickly. Most of the other animals, they're born almost completely hardwired. They know what to do. Their brains are pretty much fully formed when they're born. Our species is not like this. So when babies are born, they're completely dependent on mums, dads, families in protecting and providing. And one of the reasons why toddlers like to play and like to touch things and move around is because the brain is developing very quickly, very rapidly in these early stages. The brain is plastic, so the brain is being developed through experience, and this is what is occurring. And it's a particular feature of humans, and it's what enables us to go into so many different environments and adapt. By and large, we have the same number of neurons throughout our lives. So children and adults have pretty much the same number of neurons, but it's the connections between those neurons, the synapses, which change throughout our lives. So when we're born, we have a number of neurons, but then they're connected, and pathways and circuitry and associations are all connected, and there's something like 100 trillion connections between all of the synapses, an astronomical number of connections between the neurons in the brain. And it's the neurons that are conveying electrical impulses. Other things he talks about, really interesting point about Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein famously dedicated his brain to science when he died. And when he died, they tried to find out why he was a genius. They tried to look at his brain and figure out, okay, so why did this man prove to be so successful? Why was he so intelligent? Why was he able to, discover E=mc² and photovoltaic effect, general theory of relativity? Very high-end mathematics, extremely abstract, and they were quite surprised at what they discovered. They actually discovered on the parts of his brain which is exercised and is responsible for the movement of fingers on his left hand, there was an indication that that part of his brain was much more developed, and this was because he was a violinist. Not many people know this, but Albert Einstein loved to play the violin and actually considered becoming a professional violinist. So they didn't really find the reason as to why he was able to, the cognitive brilliance of the man, that wasn't clear from dissecting his brain, but they did see something that was kind of obvious, and it was specifically the part of his brain which controls the fingers of the left hand. So over the many years, he's practicing 20 minutes a day, the constant movement of the fingers, which is a very complex process. It involves neurons moving down the fingers and the very subtle and intricate dexterity required to play on the violin, all of those tiny little movements to get the exact intonation. That's exercising a very particular part of the brain. And this showed when they analysed his brain. He does, in an interview on YouTube, suggest that one of the reasons why we dream is because what you don't use, you lose. So one of the things with the brain is that it can atrophize, can become weaker if you're not using your brain. And the reason why we dream might be that when we're sleeping, your brain is sending out pulses, waves, and this is enabling you to dream. So you've got a narrative, you've got a story, it can be a strange dream, but this is your brain's way of keeping the back part of your brain active and to constantly exercise it and ensure that those pathways are strengthened and they're not becoming weak through disuse, because we sleep for quite a long time if you think about it. Maybe half the day of a 24-hour cycle is used just sleeping. So if we were just to go to sleep and that visual cortex is turned off, then it might become weaker. And so this is an interesting idea. The reason why we dream might be your brain's way of keeping, like standby mode on the computer. When you leave a computer, you just put it on standby, and then it's working away, it's not completely shutting down. One interesting thing is the hippocampus. Hippocampus is normally associated with memory, and clearly it's very important in memory. Classic study of London black cab drivers who have to go through the arduous process of learning the map of London, all of the streets, and I don't know if they still do it. I'd be a little bit surprised if they do, because with modern technology, the sat-nav, I'd be surprised if they have to take that test that requires maybe 4 or 5 years of training, knowing how to get from a landmark to a particular house and the streets, and to do all of it by memory. In black cab drivers, like Einstein's brain with the left fingers, their hippocampus is noticeably, there's a particular part of the hippocampus, spatial awareness. I think that it's the part that's important when it comes is spatial awareness. That in taxi, black cab drivers is larger. So there are pictures of the brain in the book as well, and there is detail for some of you who maybe are quite aware of the different parts of the brain. There is the nitty-gritty and the nuts and bolts and the more technical aspects as well, which you can research. A genuinely brilliant book. Do go check it out on YouTube or on Amazon. Get yourself a copy. Don't think it's particularly expensive as well. David Eagleman has given a number of talks and has written quite a few other books as well, which are probably worth checking out. Thank you for watching.